Hello everyone and welcome to the second of Engine's webinars leading out of lockdown series. Your customers and employees have changed, what now? Today's webinar will focus on trying to unpick how our changing attitudes towards health and wellness will change the way we work and influence the services we use. It should be a great session. If you have any questions, please submit them through the chat feature, and if we have time at the end, we'll address them or get back to you afterwards. So, without much further ado, let me introduce you to our expert panel today. So first up, we have Michelle Hammond. So Michelle is a leading independent wellness consultant and founder of two health and wellness training companies, Spa Business School and Teapot, The Power of Touch. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you.
We also have Hannah Richardson. So Hannah is the SVP of Global Client Services and General Manager for EMEA and APAC at BGRS, who are an employee relocation specialist. Finally, we have Itamar Ferrer. So she is one of Engine's design directors. She leads projects across Europe and the Middle East to help clients fix, respond, reimagine, and innovate their services and customer experiences. Welcome, Itamar.
Thank you, James.
We're here to sort of discuss both how the customer and the employee experience has changed. The pandemic hasn't just had a massive toll on people's physical health. The World Health Organization, amongst other bodies, are warning of a rise in reported mental health issues. A recent study by Harvard showing that there's a 20% increase in the number of people citing the pandemic as the cause for their issues. It's really challenged all of our outlooks and our own health and well-being. There's been a booming online workout industry, now worth an estimated $100 million, and is an indicator of how behaviors are starting to change. I think what we're seeing globally is all countries seeing the importance of recovery as being getting people moving again, whether that be getting people back to work and living normally again, and beginning that economic recovery. But in the immediate term, normal is going to be very different, and with an increasing amount of us looking to reconfigure our lives to achieve a better balance, achieve more and work less, we now find ourselves with a new reality. So how has the conversation on health and well-being changed? How are organizations constructing their employees' experience? And how are customers' outlook to the services they use beginning to change? What new needs and behaviors will we see, and which ones will endure beyond the immediate term? So if I could start with you, Michelle, how has the recent crisis shifted perceptions of what employees and customers' health means to them?
Great question, James. I think this pandemic has shifted our perception. I think firstly, this pandemic has made us all get up close and personal with their fragility, hasn't it? It's made us all realise just how vulnerable we are. And I think in that vulnerability, we've recognised and valued our health more than ever before. We realise that obviously this pandemic has had a huge impact on loss of life and deprivation around the world. And I think that value of health has kind of come forward first and foremost, because we've had to suddenly look at actually what can we do? It's not outside of ourselves anymore. What can we do individually and independently to look after our own well-being, to protect ourselves? And whether that's looking at ways to boost our immunity, improve our respiratory health, maybe lose some weight, move more, eat better, sleep well. I think we've just took a bit more responsibility to step back and say, actually, what can I do to help myself? And I think obviously that we're seeing them impacted throughout the workplace and the way we engage with sort of one another. And I think it's been a huge awakening as well. I think we've realised that actually health isn't just about movement. It isn't just about going to the gym. And mental and emotional health has been tested the most, hasn't it? It's been an incredibly challenging time. And I think now more than ever, most of us are at least a few months into this lockdown, and most of us want to break out. We're desperate now to rebel against this and to try and reclaim some normality, whatever that may be. And I think that resilience and that need to strengthen our emotional sort of toolbox, if you like, has come to the fore. We've all had to dig deep to kind of survive and to get through it, and not just for ourselves, but for the people we love and care about, whether that's elderly parents that are distanced from us, or sort of children we have in our care, or our employers, keeping them motivated and focused and sort of supported. So I think that connection, we've recognized connection is the most important thing, and that comes from feeling, you know, well and cared for, and I think we've appreciated the interconnectedness, that actually we're not, it's not just about us. We are reliant on each other much more than probably we appreciated in you know, sort of pre-lockdown.
And are you seeing that? Are you seeing that sort of increased awareness being not only increased awareness with your own health, but very consciously thinking about the health and the mental well-being of others? Are you seeing that as something that, you know, as you say, we're all connected in some way, but are you seeing much more engagement with other people, being concerned about other people's health, certainly in the workplace? Or
I mean, I think we've seen that with the incredible amount of hundreds and thousands of people that volunteered when they were first asked. I mean, particularly here in the UK, there was an outreach for sort of qualified staff, both within the NHS and the medical profession in the wider community. And the uptake of people coming back into that environment to help and roll their sleeves up was incredible. The amount of individuals that were at home and furloughed, or found themselves having more time than normal because they weren't commuting or whatever, wanting to give back to their community and contribute more, and I definitely think that kind of care is considered now. So it, you know, as you say, it's about ourselves. We're more aware of what can we do to look after ourselves, but we're also much more, you know, sort of connected to the individuals we're working with, to say, actually, before I focus on what have you done, you know, let me focus on firstly how you are. So yeah, I think we're much more, I think we're palpating much more the challenges people might be going through, and we're much more able to support them and much more willing to look at ways we can support them.
Yeah. And Hannah, do you see do you see some of these manifesting themselves as challenges when you think about the organisations trying to provide a positive employee experience? What are some of the things that you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And very similar themes really to what Michelle shared. Certainly with our corporate book of client business that we have globally, we are seeing very much those clients coming to the fore with very strong messages around their corporate social responsibility policies and measures. There's a real feeling of greater visibility from CEOs and senior leaders really wanting to reach out and connect. There has been an absolute drive for a greater degree of connection and visibility of leaders at every level. And I think there is an absolute genuine awareness of this feeling of isolation. I mean, businesses globally had to mobilize very quickly to ensure that all workers were suddenly virtual workers. And the impact that that's had, certainly when I look at our own workforce, at the speed at which we managed to get, you know, close to 1,500 people across multiple countries actually galvanized into being able to work from home. That in itself was a huge feat. So it's actually pushed a lot of things that were on the sort of list to do to the fore. But with that, it didn't have the planning measures to support employees, our people, necessarily in a way that we may have taken the time in a pre-COVID world to have thought through. So some of the measures, for example, are very much around ensuring that everybody is connected with on a regular basis to sort of really look at this piece around isolation. Particularly, you know, we have a very young workforce, very dynamic. A lot of them either live on their own or maybe in a shared flat or home. That's had impacts right down to ensuring that people actually have the tools to do their job. In an office, you take it for granted you have the right size desk, you have the right ergonomic chair, you have the right stands for your hardware kit. Not everybody has that set up at home. We're you know, there are employers out there who are, you know, sending flat pack furniture, for example, out to their global workforce just to make sure that they have a desk and the right chair to continue. So really ensuring that the people have the tools to do their job. But absolutely, there's much greater visibility of leadership, not just also with employees, but also where employees or customers have access to services that are delivered through the service chain. So service chain partners or supply partners, we can also see a greater degree of connection, again, from our client organizations who are wanting to reach out to critical service providers like our company, just to ensure that there's still that connection in a virtual sense, in absence of all the regular face-to-face type meetings we would typically run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to understand this. I guess one of the significant things around the reaction to the pandemic is the speed at which we needed to respond to it. Itamar, from your work with some of the employee work and some of the customer work that you've done, do you have a view on, how customers or employees have responded to having to need to shift so quickly to a new way of being?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the real trick there is kind of understanding individual concerns. When we're all in one space, our needs almost like flatten out and are the same, right? So when Hannah says, thinking about each individual setup at home, that's different for everybody. And they might be concerned on a different number of things of what's happening in their surrounding. When you're in an office environment or in a work environment, you can control that. And then you suddenly have to, organizations suddenly have to start to think about what is everyone's individual scenario? How do we understand how we respond to those things? And then obviously that the environment we're in will impact how people behave, how people feel, how productive they can be at work. So kind of trying to understand all of those shifting needs within employees, and also expectations around customers in terms of how much they want to engage with services, I think is something that has been really challenging for organizations. And they've had to move really, really quickly in order to do that. And then putting things in place to make sure that they can open up that dialogue of how are you feeling, what do you need, to make sure that they can respond to that. It's certainly something that's almost like at the top of the agenda for many, many companies at the moment.
Yeah. And Michelle, do you when you think about employers in particular, which areas do you believe they should be most concerned about when they're thinking about getting their employees back safely and maintaining their health and well-being?
Yeah, I think everyone is kind of zoned in at the moment, aren't they, on that kind of protection element. What can we do to minimize risk and to enable people to work safely and well? And of course, people are taking that lead from the medical and scientific professionals and the government guidance from their individual sort of locations. And I think that's key. I think the continual conversation around that is key. And I think that's where the openness of communication and that ability to empower people to work in a way they feel comfortable and safe, because everyone has been impacted by this pandemic very differently. And some people feel very keen to get back into the workplace. They feel keen to get back to old normal. Some people are really pushing for a new normal, and other people are kind of indifferent and just feel they need, for mental health reasons, physical health reasons, that kind of change of environment. And I think empowering individuals to know that their workplace is safe, but actually that it's okay to kind of script and schedule work in a way that's comfortable for them, especially in the initial phases where, as I say, people are coming at this from very different reasons. I mean, we can see just again sort of here in the UK, some people have been out at the beaches in mass and have kind of been a little bit sort of over relaxed around any sort of principles of lockdown, and then you have some people that still have not left their home yet 3 months later and are very anxious about it. And I think recognizing that individual people will feel very differently. So I think as an employer, all we can do is make sure our environment is compliant, is safe, people feel secure there, they feel listened to, and that the conversation is ongoing and continual, and people feel that they can engage into that conversation. And I feel it's about recognizing that humanistic approach, isn't it? That give people their objectives, but let them come at it whichever way is most sort of comfortable for them. And that kind of just reinforces that trust and that reciprocal relationship. And I think, as I say, particularly in this immediate sort of changed phase as we come out of lockdown, that's going to be really, really sort of important. And celebrating the human connectedness, making the workplace fun, because people are going to start to go, actually, why do I want to go there? Why do I need to go there? So there has to be a real reason for people to need to go into the office. That connection, that collaboration, stuff they can't do at home and can't do remotely. So the workplace should hopefully become more of a collaborative space, and of a place people feel they're getting real value from sort of being in.
Yeah, great. And Ismail, do you get a sense of, obviously, all of us are, people and customers of service, so a lot of our sort of behaviors as employees are changing. But what do you see on the horizon from a sort of behaviors around health and well-being when it comes to customers particularly?
I think a lot of people, so we tend to talk about new behaviors or the new normal, and I think there's an element of not those things are necessarily being new, but I would say that some elements that were underlying have now been augmented, and it's reshaped priorities. So I think some of those concerns or those needs were always there, but now they shifted in terms of what is priority. And I think that's based on two dimensions. I think we have the individual and I think we have the collective. So I think individually, people are looking at, as you were saying, Michelle, their level of comfort in relation to risk. So safety and well-being, obviously, and they're evaluating how they feel about certain things, but also think they're really trying to understand how the service or how their employee are then delivering that promise to them and how comfortable they feel with that setup. I think that's going to be something that's really going to lead on what decisions they make in terms of what services they use or what services they don't use, and also to what extent, right? So we're in a constant, almost like evaluation of our needs, our expectations, our sort of comfort with the risk around sort of health. And I think that's gonna, we've seen that impact everyday services like transportation, and obviously we've seen that heavily impact leisure and retail. And I think it'd be really interesting to see now that things start to activate in terms of shops, how customers are going to behave with new guidance around how you flow through an environment, what you can and what you cannot touch. And I think that's a really interesting space to kind of keep a look on and understand how those needs are shifting. But I think in general, we see almost like 5 core behaviors, I would say, that have emerged to the level of priority and potentially will continue to stay on. So, someone who is hyper health aware, either that be because they have different levels of anxiety around risk or they have underlying conditions that kind of triggers that behavior. You're going to have things that are really people that are really conscious around the people around them and the environment. So those that look out for others, for their neighbors, for the community, that are really active in that space, that are really looking at what services are supporting that element. You're going to have obviously people like all of us, which are multitasking, trying to work from home, engaging with a number of things, homeschooling, all of that, which obviously will need services to respond in a certain way for that particular behavior. Other people have adapted really quickly. They've made the most out of the situation, and they're going to want to have tools that can support them to continue to be really active and do that. And we've mentioned before that small group of people, sort of the denier, or I would probably say maybe the ill-informed, who just want to carry out life as normal. And I think those kind of behaviors are really going to start to shape some of the decisions that customers make, but also some of the decisions that service providers are going to have to make in terms of responding to that. And then obviously there's the collective around, we're all in this together, right? So this element of everyone looking out of each other. And I think when it comes to re-engaging into the workspace, I think we're really going to see that sort of within the group of employees, and that sort of collective concern about that group, both for people who might be in a physical space, but also for those who you cannot see and might still continue to work remotely, either because they don't have the means of getting to the workplace that they're comfortable with, or just because it's their preference. So I think, in all of that, we're really going to have to think about health in a way that's very holistic. So that mental, emotional, physical connection of everything.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think, this idea of the kind of collective responsibility, and even with understanding that perhaps, you're thinking around the wellness of your workforce has to be manifest within each individual person, as opposed to within a department that looks after the people bit. I think it becomes really interesting, and how we work as service providers and service users to kind of all stick to the same rules that make everyone else comfortable and maintain the health of everyone, as opposed to just thinking about our own individual experience is really interesting. Just thinking about how organizations move beyond the kind of restart phase, I guess, which is where they're starting to think about, okay, what is the new normal for us? Michelle, what are some of the key areas that leading organizations focus on that have become the most effective on employee experience? What are we seeing becoming the new normal for organizations?
Well, I think this is a real coming of age, isn't it? I mean, for me, this is a real opportunity and coming of an age. And I think what's been really nice is people have been forced to have time. There's been a natural reflection period. And I think that in that reflection gives us all an opportunity to make change and to look at choices. Ultimately, we all want businesses that are productive and deliver high performance and are profitable. And so it's actually, how can we harness the true power of people to enable that to happen? So I think everyone is starting to look at, actually, who are we, first and foremost? Who are we? What do we do? Why do we do it? I think within our sector, which is kind of wellness, hospitality sector, people are looking at, actually, there may have been times where they've been trying to be everything to everyone. So actually, is there a natural streamlining? Actually, are we just refocusing at getting good at what we were really about, the true heart of their business? And I think that's opened up some really creative conversations. I think people have had opportunities to try new things in lockdown too, to keep their businesses going and for survival. So it's been very needs driven. But out of that, we've seen some incredible collaborations, some incredible creativity. Now, some of them will fall by the wayside as people go back to doing what they do. But I think what I hope people hold on to is that creativity, is that forced need to continually reflect and evaluate who we are, what we do, and why we do it, and to engage everyone in that conversation. So I think communication and that connectedness still just kind of really jumps through, and looking at policies and procedures that may have kind of limited people, really, or restricted people. So of course, we want people to look at, and people are starting to look at, the work environment. How do we make the work environment a better place? And that doesn't matter whether it's at home, remotely, or sort of in office, in situ environment. How do we make that more suitable for the individual? How do we get that more customized? But I think we're also looking then about, how do we make departments work better together? How do we integrate more? How do we collaborate more? And so maybe there'll be some movement within that, not just because the 2-meter social distancing, but because naturally, actually thinking, well, actually, we started to realize that doing it this way opened up a different conversation. So I'm hoping it's just really flagged opportunity for people, and people are taking the chance to reflect and to sort of make change. And as I say, integrate everybody into the conversation, realizing that everyone has a part to play in the game.
Yeah, great. And Hannah, is this sort of desire to kind of get back to an understanding of what sits at the core, really understanding your purpose? Is that something you're seeing with some of the organizations that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely, James. And I think vision has never been more critical to all organizations. Vision and purpose. They need to be sort of the central mainstays of how leaders are moving their businesses forward. And I think, you know, tying in with Michelle's themes there that she shared, this is a great opportunity for leaders especially to have the ability to be far more creative and innovative than ever before. And I think this is a great opportunity now for that mindset shift and thinking to really be reflected in policy making. And we certainly are starting to see a shift already with the clients and prospect opportunities that we're working with at the moment. And typically policy, certainly that sort of underpins the allowances and benefits that enable global mobility, certainly the industry we work within, which is this mobile movement of multiple home host locations to enable talent to be globally mobile. Historically, it's always been very much underpinned by core defined benefits as determined by the corporate. And I think what this pandemic has enabled is a different lens to come over. And actually, those organizations who are very much vision-led, people-led, experience-led, and are really driving an experience agenda within those organizations are taking this as an opportunity now to say, actually, we need to listen, and we really do need to understand the needs and requirements of our people, because they are different. And trying to sort of, as Michelle was sort of showing, trying to sort of take that holistic view of everybody and actually try and get that through policy, it is really challenging. But actually now to have a far more sort of tailored and flexible approach to truly understanding client and customer requirements does enable then for those organizations to make that experience shift. And we are certainly seeing that, as I say, with some of the newer opportunities we're working on, where typically there will be a core of defined benefits. They're now widening to also include duty of care. And that's something very new that clearly organizations, as we're working through the pandemic, are now reflecting through policy to ensure that things like health provision are very much made available and accessible to all, but then really opening up then the flexible benefits that can accompany an assignee or a customer actually going on some form of international assignment. So absolutely, this is a tremendous time we see for corporates and organizations to really step up, truly understand the art of the possible, and reflect that by really acknowledging they understand their people's and employee requirements.
And I'm assuming sort of duty of care in this instance is beyond sort of ensuring that people have, you know, adequate healthcare wherever they're going. This is what I'm understanding is that this is looking after almost every touch point with every potentially third party that you meet. Are they adhering to the same standard of duty of care?
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes beyond, if you want, what the corporate employer is providing as a core provision.
Yeah.
It's very much ensuring that the experience for as long as that employee is working with them, that it extends through the service chain, so that there is this natural certified to serve almost, that the shift in a post-COVID world is recognized and understood, especially where there are a lot of face-to-face interactions. So as you're moving mobile talent into new host country locations, there's a lot of face-to-face human interactions that in a post-COVID world will need to change. And it's first of all acknowledging that things need to change, but also there's this big agenda now from corporates to ensure that we're giving the right messages around assurance and are continually reassuring our people, because people are nervous and reticent, because I think what the pandemic has done is poured this huge shining light and instilled quite a lot of fear in people. And when people are globally mobile, they're not typically always moving on their own. They're typically going with a partner or a spouse and children or other dependents within their family unit. And of course, that has a huge impact on their well-being and how they're processing what should be a really exciting opportunity to go on assignment. So it's actually ensuring that the right measures are there in place to support, reassure, and still enable global mobility to move forward, but with an acknowledgement that in a post-COVID world, things will have to change and the
Yeah, yeah,
experience will need to change.
yeah. And do you, what aspects of, so obviously you're in your capacity within BGRS, you're very focused on sort of moving people around the world. What do you see as a result? You know, what impact do you think you'll see as a result of COVID-19 on that employee mobility? What are some of the sort of new challenges, I guess, that employers would face? You've talked about the duty of care, but do you see some more large and radical changes to how people are moving jobs and moving abroad, etc.?
Sure. And I would probably flip it actually to say, rather than challenges, I think this actually presents new opportunities for corporate employers. Already the dialogue has changed. So large corporate employers who have a great global footprint covering 70, 80 plus country jurisdictions are now looking at virtual assignments. It's always been talked about, but actually, you know, COVID-19 has enforced a very new way of working for us all. We're all virtual workers in some capacity. And so the idea and thinking now around virtual assignments, where there is a large global footprint, that can actually now become a real conversation. So typically, when we would move somebody with a senior global role, they would typically go into the main hub or the HQ in a certain region. But now actually that thinking's being challenged, because if you do have a global role, actually what says you have to go and work from Singapore? Actually, if you've always wanted to work from Switzerland, for example, a global role is a global role. Now, clearly that can't be a blanket approach for all roles, because if you are the general manager of an automobile manufacturing assembly plant in China, then you're probably going to have to be there. But it is forcing a different discussion and dialogue with corporates now, with a different view and lens on global mobility, to say, actually, is there a greater freedom we can allow our people to fundamentally work where they wish?
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Do you Itamar, when you think about services and how they need to adapt, what do you see as some of the critical behaviors or the perceptions that you think that are almost critical to meet now?
Yeah, I think there is going to be this view on customers are definitely going to be more critical about their choice and services they use. I think, as you were mentioning before, Michelle, this element of giving people a reason why and that element of value, I think that's going to lead on some of those decisions. I think there's also been, with people having to stay at home, a high adoption of digital services, partially out of necessity. And I think there's going to continue to be that demand and the expectations for digital services to become better. That's gonna grow. I think in that space, I think services will need to continue to be able to innovate in that space. But I think there also has to be this element of supporting digital education and digital enablement. So we know that there's a lot of people that had never used it, digital services in this extent before, might be very new to using that. And I think if that space kind of really continues to grow, then there's going to have to be that element of almost like getting everyone up to speed on how to best use it, particularly when it comes with all the complexities around, data and how data is managed and handled, etc. So I think that's going to be an area that's going to be really interesting to look at. I think obviously the adoption of wellbeing and sustainability practices, as we've been discussing, and I think services that can put robust policies in place in order to do that will be in a really strong position. And obviously we've seen how public services had to sort of really quickly respond to elements like here in the UK, how the NHS has started to shift the way that they provide consultations, for example, and responding to that need of people that are not ill with COVID-19, but just, want to have a regular checkup or have other kind of, you know, health issues that they need to take care of. Those things are going to have to be sort of developed into a fully fledged and robust solutions, right? What we've got now is kind of a quick response. And I think that's a huge opportunity for growth in terms of public services. Sort of going back to what we've been discussing, I think there a lot of organizations are going to have to potentially rethink their proposition and the service model. And within that, I think there's going to be an element of building a good level of resilience in terms of, if something happens, how do we react to, and really, why are we here and who do we serve? And I think that is really a very, very interesting space to be in right now, because I think that's going to lead to a massive peak on new service development, probably a lot of tech innovation. I think, you know, people are going to really, really have to rethink how they serve their customers and how they engage and enable their employees to deliver that service. So I think that's going to be really interesting space in the next, you know, near medium future.
Yeah, great. So just thinking ahead to that sort of, you know, in the last webinar we talked about reimagining what that sort of near-term future might be. Michelle, what changes to the employee experience do you think will stick post the pandemic? What things, in your opinion, are here to stay?
Well, I mean, I think it's exciting because this opportunity has presented itself. And I think it really is a once in a lifetime opportunity for most of us. Well, we hope it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for most of us, that, you know, this pandemic isn't, you know, we're not going to be hit by regular pandemics, but, you know, this has took us off guard, and we've had to react, and we've had to be needs based. And as Itamar said, we now have to take that, you know, sort of experience and turn it into something much more robust. And so what I hope continues and what I hope sticks is the collaboration element, because I think initially when we were kind of equipping our workforces to work remotely and, you know, trying to you know, going into sort of default survival mode, I don't think many businesses realised just how collaborative and connected people could be, either because they weren't leveraging technology or they were only using it in a very limited way, and I guess because we weren't needing to do everything via it, we weren't sort of maximising it sort of fully. So I think, and I hope people realise that technology is our friend used in the right way, and that we leverage that technology better. And the collaborations we've had remotely, whether we have those in person or sort of continue, you know, a blend of those, I think that openness to look wider than ourselves has been beautiful. I mean, we've seen some incredible collaborations of people that would never have collaborated or even looked outside of their own lane had the pandemic sort of not hit. So I think that should stick. I hope that sticks. The connection in that, you know, the fact that actually everyone's had an opportunity to be seen and heard. I think that's really beautiful. You know, technology and being on Zoom has leveled us all out, whether we're on, you know, sort of work or social. I think having an opportunity to be seen and heard, especially at the moment when diversity and the celebration of differences and inclusiveness is obviously such a hot topic and so integral to our survival. So I think that openness, that connectiveness, that collaboration must stay. And I think as Hannah was saying, that the duty of care, I think for me, the one thing I've had from most companies I've spoke to over the last few months from an employee's point of view, if they've said, God, I really feel like I know some of the people I work with better in the last 3 months than I did working alongside them for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. And actually people are starting with that conversation of how are you, rather than what have you done. And I think that in itself, that just slight reframe, where we recognise people as individuals and that they are more than just what they do in their job, that they are more complex than that. They come with more skills and capabilities than that. And I think recognising that, rewarding that, and sort of nurturing that, if you like, whether that's nurturing it through, you know, physical care, whether it's providing great environments or great food, great facilities, great experiences, I think will enable and empower a real leap forward. And I think that's what's really exciting. I think we have that opportunity at the moment to jump much further forward than we ever could have, just going in sort of third gear as we were sort of pre-pandemic.
Yeah. And Hannah, from your standpoint, what from your view, what do you think is going to stick beyond this recovery period?
I think it comes back to this art of the possible. I think we have probably all in a corporate capacity underestimated what truly we as a connected set of humans can deliver together. I think some of the ingenuity and innovation that's come through has been quite staggering in terms of actually what we as a collective group are able to do together. And not just, I'm not just talking to our own industry, but I'm just talking to globally, when you see how people have come together united to deliver some quite phenomenal outcomes, be they experience outcomes or just be they for the greater good. So I think it's not underestimating what we can truly do as a collective unit of people with that same sense of vision and purpose to get us through into a post-COVID world, and then embrace however that's going to look.
Yeah, brilliant. So, I mean, broadly, it's great to hear you guys sort of talk about some of the things that, I've taken away is, the importance of the collective action, being super important, whether that be within an organization or externally or as a body of customers. How we increasingly have to maintain this idea of collaboration, and whether that be from a regular regulation standpoint or actually just the way we work on a daily basis. And I think just the broad idea that actually necessity often drives opportunity and often drives us to think about things differently. And maybe this is I think Michelle, you mentioned it, a once in a lifetime opportunity to maybe rethink some of the things that we took for granted in the first place. So thank you very much for that. Just before we end today, we launched the first part of our toolkit in the last webinar, which was to help CX professionals reprioritize and build their development plans around 3 phases of recovery to restart, reconfigure, and reimagine. Today, we wanted to add to that. We provided some starter pandemic personas. So that's a tool that outlines some of the emerging needs and behaviors associated with people who've been through the lockdown. So that's, to a certain extent, all of us. You can download these, hopefully tomorrow. And these are customer profiles that you can use to challenge your own thinking around services and the products you might be developing, or just to adapt what you're doing to suit specific needs and behaviors within your sector. It just remains for me to say thank you very much to our expert panelists, Michelle, Hannah, Itamar. Thank you for a great conversation, sharing your insight on both the employee and the customer experience. And thank you everyone who's tuned in to watch this. We'll be sort of communicating about our next webinar shortly, so stay tuned and do go to the website tomorrow to download those pandemic personas.